They say ignorance is bliss, but that phrase only works when ignorance is an option. For me, it stopped being one the moment my colleague, James, burst into my office with a look of palpable discomfort. "Ethan," he said, fidgeting with his phone, "this isn't easy to bring up, but I think you need to see something." I leaned back in my chair, weary from a long day, and gave him a skeptical look. "What is it?" James hesitated, as if debating whether to back out, before shoving his phone toward me. On the screen was a YouTube channel, brightly decorated with pastel colors and a cutesy banner that read Confessions with Clarissa. At first glance, it looked harmless, almost juvenile. But then I noticed the video titles. "I cheated on my husband, here's why." "The thrill of keeping secrets." "When love turns to lies, my story." My chest tightened as I read the captions. Surely it couldn't be. James tapped the most recent video titled, "The Night My Husband Didn't Know." The screen filled with an image of my wife, Clarissa. Her face, so familiar, so cherished, looked straight into the camera with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't shame. It wasn't regret. It was pride? I watched in stunned silence as Clarissa spoke, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "People might judge me for what I'm about to say, but I've always believed in honesty, even if it's too late. My husband doesn't know about the things I've done. He doesn't know the full story, and maybe he never will. But I need to share it somewhere. I need to feel free." The camera zoomed in slightly as she leaned forward, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "The first time I cheated on Ethan, it was thrilling. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, but..." I stopped the video, unable to listen any further. My hands trembled as I pushed the phone back toward James. "Where did you find this?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. "It's been making the rounds," James admitted, looking genuinely pained. "A couple of people in the office have seen it. I thought you deserved to know." Deserved to know. The phrase echoed in my mind as I tried to process what I'd just seen. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was broadcasting her infidelity for the world to see. And I was the last to find out. James left soon after, his awkward attempts at comfort doing little to soothe the storm brewing inside me. Alone in my office, I pulled out my laptop and searched for the channel. The results came up immediately, her videos sitting there like open wounds, each one waiting to pour salt into my already shattered world. I clicked on another video, unable to resist the masochistic urge to hear more. This one was titled, "Secrets That Keep Us Alive." Clarissa's voice filled the room once more. "The thing about secrets is that they make life exciting. They remind you that you're alive, that you're still capable of surprising yourself. For so long, I felt like I was fading away in the shadow of being the perfect wife. But then, I found someone who saw me. Really saw me." Her smile, warm, intimate, was like a knife to my chest. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about rediscovering who I was, reclaiming a part of myself I thought I'd lost. I slammed the laptop shut, my breathing ragged. Her words played on a loop in my mind, each one more agonizing than the last. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was justifying it, painting herself as some kind of martyr in a story where I was the villain. Anger surged through me, hot and blinding. But beneath it, a cold, calculated resolve began to form. Clarissa thought she could control the narrative, that she could expose me to humiliation and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. This wasn't over. When I got home that evening, the house was eerily quiet. Clarissa sat in the living room, scrolling on her phone as if she hadn't just torn my world apart. The sight of her calmness, her obliviousness to the storm brewing inside me, made my blood boil. "Hey," she said without looking up. "Dinner's in the oven. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. I forced a smile, though my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "Thanks." The normalcy of it all was suffocating. How could she sit there, acting like the doting wife, when she was broadcasting her betrayal to the world? I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in her face, but I held back. This wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd done before making my move. Over the next few days, I played my part. I went to work, helped with the household chores, and even made small talk with Clarissa over dinner. All the while, I watched her closely, searching for cracks in her facade. She didn't seem nervous or guilty. If anything, she seemed lighter, happier. At night, after she went to bed, I pored over her YouTube channel, combing through every video. Each one was a fresh wound, filled with intimate details of her deceit. She spoke about how the affair started, the thrill of keeping it secret, and even how she'd rationalized it as something she deserved. What struck me most was how careful she was with her words. She never mentioned names or dates, but the clues were there if you knew where to look. A reference to that business trip Ethan took last spring. A comment about the coworker who always made me laugh. It was all vague enough to keep her viewers intrigued, but specific enough to leave me no doubt about the timeline. One night, I stumbled across a video that made my stomach churn. It was titled, "The Night I Almost Got Caught." Clarissa's face filled the screen, her expression a mix of amusement and pride. "So, there was this one time," she began, "when I thought Ethan was going to find out. He came home early from work, and there I was, sitting on the couch with, well, let's call him Mr. X. She laughed, as though the memory was a fond one. I had to think fast. I told Ethan I'd invited a friend over for lunch, and Mr. X was just leaving. He bought it, of course. He trusts me. Or trusted me." Her smile faded for a moment, replaced by a flicker of something that might have been regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Anyway, it was a close call. But that's the thing about secrets, you get good at hiding them. You learn how to keep people from seeing what's right in front of them." I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling with rage. The memory she described came rushing back to me, the day I'd come home early, surprised to see a strange car in the driveway. Clarissa had been so nonchalant, so convincing in her explanation, that I hadn't questioned it. Now I felt like a fool. Every moment of trust, every assumption of innocence, had been a lie. But not anymore. I wasn't going to sit idly by while she spun her web of deceit. If Clarissa wanted to play the role of the unrepentant adulterer, I was going to give her an ending she'd never forget. The next day, I called in sick to work and stayed home after Clarissa left to run errands. I needed to gather evidence, something concrete that would expose her lies once and for all. I started with her laptop, combing through her emails, social media accounts, and search history. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Her email inbox was a treasure trove of incriminating messages. Most of them were from someone named Jordan, a name I didn't recognize. The tone of the emails was casual but intimate, inside jokes, references to shared memories, and plans for future rendezvous. Then I found a folder titled Confessions Script Notes. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside were detailed outlines for her YouTube videos, each one carefully crafted to maximize engagement and intrigue. It was all there, the characters, the twists, even suggestions for how to frame her husband, me, as inattentive or emotionally distant. I felt sick. This wasn't just a series of confessions. It was a calculated performance, designed to paint her as a misunderstood victim while dragging me through the mud. But the worst discovery came later that evening, when I checked our shared bank account. Buried among the usual expenses was a series of transactions I didn't recognize: hotel bookings, fancy dinners, and even a jewelry store purchase. My blood ran cold as I realized what it meant. She wasn't just cheating. She was using our money to fund her betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed next to Clarissa, my mind raced with plans. She thought she was untouchable, that her lies would never catch up to her. But she was wrong. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to destroy her. Piece by piece, secret by secret, until there was nothing left of the life she'd so carelessly thrown away. This was just the beginning. My anger was a steady burn, keeping me sharp and focused. Over the next week, I pieced together a plan, something cold and methodical, designed to dismantle Clarissa's carefully curated life. She wanted attention, an audience for her betrayal? I would give her one. The first step was subtle, planting seeds of doubt. I began asking casual questions about her day, her videos, and her friends. At first, she didn't suspect anything, answering with her usual ease. "How's your channel going?" I asked one evening as we cleared the dinner table. Her eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Really well, actually. I've been getting more views and comments. People seem to relate to my content." I forced a smile, though bile rose in my throat. "That's great. What kind of stuff are you posting these days?" "Oh, lifestyle tips, relationship advice." She trailed off, her tone a bit too airy. "That sort of thing." Her lie was almost laughable. I nodded, hiding my disgust. "Sounds interesting. Maybe I should check it out sometime." Clarissa froze for a split second before recovering with a laugh. "I don't think it's your kind of thing. It's more personal." "Fair enough," I said lightly, pretending to let it go. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She was nervous. Good. The second step was more direct. I needed someone who could help me navigate the legal side of things. I reached out to an old friend, Marcus, who worked as a private investigator. "Marcus," I said when we met at a diner late one evening, "I need your help. My wife's been cheating, and I need proof." He raised an eyebrow, sipping his coffee. "Proof for what? Divorce? Custody battle?" "Both," I replied, the words bitter on my tongue. "And more. She's running a YouTube channel, airing everything like it's entertainment. I want to shut her down." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I'll need access to her accounts, her movements, her communications." "Can you get me that?" "I've already started gathering evidence," I said, sliding him a folder. "Emails, bank statements, even outlines for her videos." He whistled low as he flipped through the papers. "She's bold, I'll give her that. Don't worry, Ethan. I'll find everything you need." With Marcus on the case, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Clarissa had built her narrative on lies, but soon I'd have the truth, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it. The third step was the hardest, confronting her partner. I had no idea who Jordan was or what kind of person he might be, but I was determined to find out. Using the clues in Clarissa's emails, I tracked him down, a freelance photographer who lived a few towns over. I waited outside a local cafe one afternoon, watching as he strolled in, completely unaware of the storm heading his way. He was younger than me, tall and good-looking in an unassuming way. I hated him instantly. When he exited with his coffee, I stepped in front of him. "Jordan?" He looked surprised. "Yeah. Do I know you?" "You don't," I said coldly. "But you know my wife, Clarissa." Recognition dawned on his face, followed quickly by guilt. "Look, man, I didn't." "Save it," I snapped, my voice low but firm. "You've got two choices. You can tell me everything, right here, right now, or I can make your life a lot more complicated." He hesitated, then nodded, gesturing toward a nearby bench. We sat, and he began talking, haltingly at first, then faster as the weight of his guilt spilled out. "I didn't know she was married when we met," he said, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "She told me later, but by then, I don't know, I was already caught up in it. She said you didn't pay attention to her, that you were distant." "She lied," I said bluntly. "And you believed her?" He looked down, shamefaced. "Yeah, I did." "Did you know about her YouTube channel?" I asked, my tone sharp. Jordan's head shot up, alarmed. "Her what?" I almost laughed at his expression. Clearly, Clarissa hadn't told him everything. "She's been documenting her adventures online. You're probably in some of her stories. She just left out your name." His face paled. "You're kidding." "Does it look like I'm kidding?" I said, narrowing my eyes. "Here's the deal. Stay away from her. If I find out you've so much as texted her, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've been doing." Jordan nodded quickly, his hands shaking. "I'm done. I swear." I stood looming over him. "You'd better be." As I walked away, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. One piece of the puzzle had been dealt with. Now it was time to turn my attention back to Clarissa. With Jordan eliminated from the equation, the path ahead became clearer. Clarissa thought she was invincible, shielded by her curated lies. It was time to show her just how fragile that shield really was. The night after my meeting with Jordan, I sat in the living room while Clarissa scrolled through her phone on the couch. She seemed relaxed, even cheerful. It amazed me how oblivious she was, completely unaware that the walls were closing in around her. "Busy with your channel?" I asked casually, glancing up from my laptop. She looked over, her smile faltering for just a second. "Yeah, just responding to comments. The community is really engaged these days." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "That's good. You've put a lot of effort into it." "You think so?" she asked, tilting her head. There was a glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes, as if she was testing the waters. "You've never really shown much interest." "I guess I've been distracted with work," I said, shrugging. "But I'm paying attention now." Her smile returned, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, thanks. It means a lot." I didn't reply, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then, without another word, I stood and headed upstairs, leaving her to stew in her thoughts. The next step was the reveal. But it wasn't just about confronting Clarissa. I wanted her lies exposed on her own stage. If she wanted attention, I was going to give it to her in the worst way possible. With Marcus's help, I uncovered the passwords to her YouTube account. He assured me that accessing her channel without being detected was simple, as long as I used the information he provided. One night, after Clarissa had fallen asleep, I logged into her account. My heart pounded as her dashboard loaded, revealing video drafts, analytics, and comments from her adoring fans. It was surreal, stepping into this hidden part of her life, seeing how much effort she'd poured into spinning her betrayal into entertainment. I scrolled through her drafts and found one labeled, "My Biggest Secret Yet." Intrigued, I clicked on it. The video began with her sitting in our kitchen, a carefully curated cup of tea in her hands and an air of vulnerability on her face. "This is the hardest video I've ever made," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "But I feel like I owe it to my audience to be honest. My husband doesn't know the full truth about who I am, but I need to share it. Even if it means risking everything." I stopped the video, disgusted. She was gearing up for another performance, one that would inevitably paint her as the victim. Well, not this time. I downloaded the video, along with several others that highlighted her deceit. Then I recorded my own message, a simple, direct response to her lies. I didn't rehearse or edit it. I wanted it raw and unfiltered. "Hello, Clarissa's audience," I began, staring into the camera. "You know her as the brave, honest woman who's been sharing her truth with you. What you don't know is the real story behind her confessions. My name is Ethan. I'm her husband, the one she's been lying about for months." I laid it all out, the affair, the deception, the videos, the way she twisted the narrative to make herself look good while humiliating me. I didn't embellish or attack her character. I simply told the truth and let the facts speak for themselves. Clarissa wants to be seen as a hero in her own story, I concluded. But heroes don't betray the people they claim to love. They don't lie, cheat, and use their families as props for their own gain. I hope you'll think about that the next time she asks for your sympathy. Once the video was uploaded, I scheduled it to go live the following evening, right after one of her planned uploads. It would be unavoidable, impossible to ignore. The trap was set. The next day, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed. Clarissa, oblivious, continued to chatter about her plans for the channel and her excitement over the growing number of subscribers. I smiled and nodded, all the while counting down the hours until her perfect little world came crashing down. That evening, we sat together in the living room, Emily upstairs doing her homework. Clarissa was on her phone, likely preparing to engage with her viewers as her latest video went live. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, waiting for the moment she discovered the bomb I'd planted. It didn't take long. Her phone dinged with a notification, and she frowned as she opened it. I could see the confusion on her face as she read the comments flooding in, comments that didn't match the usual praise and adoration. "What the?" she muttered, her brow furrowing. I leaned back, feigning curiosity. "Something wrong?" She didn't answer, frantically scrolling through her phone. Then she froze, her eyes widening in horror as my video began autoplaying in the feed. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen, the color draining from her face. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I met her gaze, my expression cold. "I told the truth. Something you seem to struggle with." Clarissa's face crumpled, a mix of anger and panic. "You had no right." "No right?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You think you had the right to humiliate me? To use our marriage as content for your little circus? Consider this your encore, Clarissa." Her breathing grew ragged as she tried to process what had just happened. I stood, towering over her. "You wanted an audience," I said, my tone icy. "Now you have one. Enjoy the spotlight." I left her there, shaking and silent, as the weight of her lies came crashing down around her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos. Clarissa's YouTube channel, once a hub of adoring comments and supportive messages, had become a battleground. Her subscribers were divided, some defending her as brave for being open about her mistakes, others condemning her for the betrayal she had tried so hard to rationalize. At home, the tension was unbearable. Clarissa avoided me, spending most of her time locked in the guest bedroom, her phone glued to her hand. Occasionally, I'd hear muffled sobs or bursts of frustration as she scrolled through the fallout. It was exactly what I wanted, to make her feel the weight of her actions. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was a hollow ache. One evening, I came downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her laptop. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of anger and despair. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this to me?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Do what, Clarissa? Tell the truth. Expose you for what you really are. You did this to yourself." She slammed her laptop shut, her composure cracking. "I was trying to move on. To process everything and figure out who I am. Those videos weren't meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Weren't meant to hurt me? You drag our marriage through the mud for clicks and sympathy, and you have the audacity to say it wasn't meant to hurt me?" Clarissa stood, her hands shaking. "I made mistakes, Ethan. I admit that. But you didn't have to destroy me. You destroyed yourself." I snapped. "I just made sure everyone else saw it too." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked defeated, like the fight had been drained out of her. "What happens now?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of every lie, every betrayal. But another part, the part that still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with, just wanted this to be over. "I've already filed for divorce," I said finally. "We'll figure out custody arrangements for Emily. Beyond that, there's nothing left to discuss." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never wanted it to end like this." "Neither did I," I said, my voice cold. "But here we are." The next morning, I met with Marcus to go over the final details of the divorce case. Thanks to the evidence he'd gathered, my lawyer was confident I would secure full custody of Emily. Clarissa's actions, the affair, the YouTube channel, the lies, painted a clear picture of someone unfit to prioritize her family's well-being. "She'll fight it," Marcus warned as we wrapped up the meeting. "People like her always do. She'll play the victim, try to twist the narrative in her favor." "Let her try," I said. "I'm ready for whatever she throws at me." But even as I spoke the words, a part of me felt exhausted by the thought of another battle. I wasn't doing this out of spite, not anymore. My sole focus was protecting Emily, ensuring she had a stable and loving home free from the chaos Clarissa had brought into our lives. Clarissa's first move came 2 days later. She confronted me in the living room while Emily was at school, clutching a stack of papers and looking more determined than I'd seen her in weeks. "I'm not signing this," she said, thrusting the divorce papers toward me. I glanced at them, then back at her. "You don't have a choice." "I do," she said firmly. "You can't just take Emily away from me. I'm her mother. You're also the woman who lied to her, used our family as fodder for your videos, and brought another man into our lives," I said sharply. "Do you really think the court will side with you?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "I made mistakes, Ethan. But I love Emily. And I'm not going to let you take her away from me." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "This isn't about punishment, Clarissa. It's about what's best for Emily. Do you think she's better off being caught in the middle of your lies and manipulations?" Clarissa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room, the papers still clutched in her hand. That night, I found myself sitting on the edge of Emily's bed, watching her sleep. Her face was peaceful, her breathing steady, and for a moment, all the anger and pain faded away. She was the only thing that mattered now, the reason I had to keep fighting, no matter how exhausting it became. I kissed her forehead softly, whispering a promise I wasn't sure she could hear. "I'll keep you safe, Emily. I won't let her hurt you again." As I left her room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Clarissa could fight me all she wanted. She could twist the story, play the victim, and try to claw her way back into Emily's life. But I wouldn't let her win. Not this time. The custody battle was everything I expected, vicious, exhausting, and deeply personal. Clarissa played her role to perfection, presenting herself as a misunderstood mother who had made mistakes but still loved her child unconditionally. Her lawyer leaned into the narrative, painting me as cold, unforgiving, and more interested in punishing her than co-parenting. But facts are stubborn things. My lawyer, an unflinching woman named Naomi, presented a mountain of evidence: the YouTube videos, the emails, the bank statements, and the damning hotel reservations. She painted a picture of a woman who had not only betrayed her husband but had used her family as props in her quest for attention and validation. The videos were the most powerful weapon in our arsenal. When the court saw Clarissa laughing about her secrets, confessing to lies, and admitting to involving Emily in her deceptions, the mood in the courtroom shifted. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, didn't hide her disapproval. "I failed to see how such actions demonstrate sound judgment or prioritization of the child's welfare," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Clarissa looked pale, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The final blow came when Naomi introduced the emails Clarissa had sent to Jordan after our confrontation. The messages revealed her continued communication with him, as well as plans to maintain their relationship once the divorce was finalized. "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice calm but firm, "these emails demonstrate not only a lack of remorse but also a willingness to prioritize her personal desires over her family's well-being." Clarissa's lawyer tried to counter, claiming the emails were taken out of context and that Clarissa had ended the affair months ago. But the damage was done. When the judge delivered her verdict, it was clear where her sympathies lay. "Based on the evidence presented, I am awarding primary custody of Emily to Mr. Bennett," she said. "Mrs. Bennett will have visitation rights, contingent upon her compliance with a set of conditions designed to ensure the child's stability and well-being." Clarissa burst into tears, her sobs echoing through the courtroom. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, only a deep, aching relief that Emily would be safe. The days after the ruling were a strange mix of relief and sadness. Clarissa moved out of the house, leaving behind an emptiness that was both liberating and haunting. Emily, perceptive as ever, picked up on the tension but didn't ask too many questions. She seemed to accept the new arrangement with quiet resilience, though I knew it wasn't easy for her. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she turned to me and asked, "Do you think Mommy's okay?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "She's going through a tough time," I said carefully. "But she loves you very much, and she's doing her best." Emily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I hope she gets better." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, Emily still loved her mother, still wanted to see the best in her. It was a reminder that, no matter how angry I was, I had to tread carefully. Emily's relationship with Clarissa, fractured as it was, would always be important to her. Clarissa's YouTube channel, once thriving, quickly became a ghost town. My video had gone viral, and while some of her die-hard fans continued to defend her, most had turned against her. The comments section was filled with outrage, accusations, and demands for her to address the revelations. She tried to salvage her platform, posting a tearful video apologizing to her audience, and claiming she had been misunderstood. But the damage was irreversible. Sponsors pulled out, subscribers fled, and her once lucrative side gig crumbled before her eyes. One night, I received an email from her. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The message was short, almost desperate. "Ethan, I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for the videos, but for everything, for lying to you, for betraying you, for hurting Emily. I lost sight of what mattered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Please don't hate me. Clarissa." I didn't reply. I wasn't sure if I even could. Her apology, sincere as it seemed, felt like too little, too late. It had been a month since the custody ruling. Life, in many ways, had found a new rhythm. Emily and I were settling into our new routine, and while the absence of Clarissa lingered in the house, it was no longer as suffocating as it once was. The house was quieter, but it was also more peaceful. But the peace was fragile. I knew the moment Clarissa had begun to process the finality of the divorce, she would make another attempt to change the narrative. And, just as I'd expected, she called. I stared at my phone, the screen lit up with her name. It had been weeks since we'd spoken directly, since I'd exposed her lies for the world to see. My hands trembled slightly as I swiped to answer. "Ethan." Her voice was soft, tentative, as if she was walking on eggshells. "I need to talk to you." I exhaled slowly, bracing myself. "What is it, Clarissa?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Can we meet in person?" My first instinct was to refuse, to tell her that I had nothing left to say. But I knew she wouldn't stop pushing until she got the answer she wanted. And if nothing else, I needed to hear what she had to say, one last time. "Fine. Tomorrow. Coffee shop near the park," I said, my voice flat. "I'll be there." The next afternoon, I arrived early at the cafe, settling into a corner booth where I could see the door. My stomach was a bundle of nerves, part of me still braced for whatever emotional manipulation Clarissa would try to pull this time. But I also felt something else. A cold sense of finality. When she walked in, she looked different. Gone was the confident woman who'd once held all the cards. In her place was someone unrecognizable, tired, fragile, and worn down by the events that had unraveled her life. She spotted me and walked over slowly, as if unsure whether to sit or leave. I nodded toward the seat across from me, and she slid in, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Ethan, She trailed off, her eyes looking anywhere but at me. I took a sip of my coffee, studying her. "What's this about?" Clarissa let out a shaky breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. Not after everything I've done. But I need you to understand something." I raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. The silence in the air hung thick between us. "I know I destroyed everything," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think I was doing what was best for me, but all I did was hurt the people I loved the most. You. Emily. I'm sorry." I'm so sorry. Her words were raw, laced with genuine regret. But there was something hollow in her apology, something that told me she still wasn't fully facing the depth of her actions. I had heard similar words before, too many times. Sorry doesn't fix this, Clarissa, I said, my voice firm. You don't get to make everything right just because you finally realize what you've done. What about Emily? What about her? You dragged her into your mess, and now she has to live with the fallout. She flinched at my words, but I pressed on. You had a choice. You could have talked to me. You could have been honest, but instead, you chose secrecy. You chose betrayal. And now we're here. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought if I just kept pretending everything was fine, it would be easier. But I see now how selfish I was. Clarissa, I said, my tone hard, this isn't about how you feel now. This is about what's best for Emily. She's the only thing that matters anymore. Not you. Not me. Just her. Clarissa's face crumpled, and she looked away. I know. I know that. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to her. I leaned back in my seat, observing her carefully. Making up for it doesn't mean coming back into her life, Clarissa. You're not entitled to her. You lost that right when you chose to lie to her. She was silent for a long moment, the weight of my words sinking in. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, though tinged with sorrow. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm not the same person I was. I've changed. And I'm doing everything I can to fix the damage. I wasn't sure I believed her. I wanted to. A small part of me still clung to the hope that the woman I once loved was still there, buried underneath the wreckage of her choices. But I had to be realistic. You can't fix this with words, I said, pushing the empty coffee cup away. All you can do now is prove it. To Emily, if no one else. She nodded silently, her face pale. I will. I'll prove it. As I stood to leave, I looked at her one last time. I'm not going to forgive you. Not now. Maybe not ever. But Emily needs space from all this. She needs time to heal. I'll make sure she has that. Clarissa didn't argue, didn't try to convince me otherwise. She simply sat there, defeated. I walked out of the cafe, the door closing behind me with a soft click. For the first time in months, I felt a small sense of closure. The past was still there, lingering, but I was moving forward. The truth had been exposed, the pieces had been put in place, and now, I could focus on rebuilding what mattered most, Emily, and the life we were creating together. The days after my meeting with Clarissa felt strangely quiet. Without the constant tension, the house seemed calmer, but it was a hollow kind of peace. Emily filled the space with her chatter and laughter, but there were moments when I could see the sadness in her eyes, the absence of her mother weighing on her, even if she didn't say it aloud. I focused all my energy on being present for her. We spent our evenings baking cookies, watching movies, and working on her school projects. Every time she smiled or laughed, I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder of why I had fought so hard to protect her. But even as life settled into this new routine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One evening, while Emily was at a friend's house, I sat in the living room, sifting through the stack of letters Clarissa had left after the divorce was finalized. I hadn't been able to bring myself to read them before, but now, curiosity and a faint sense of closure pushed me to open the first one. Her handwriting was familiar, shaky in places, as though she'd written it through tears. Ethan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, and I don't blame you. But I need to try to explain. Not for me, but for Emily, and maybe a little for you. The letter was long, detailing her spiraling insecurities and the feelings of loneliness that had driven her actions. She didn't excuse herself, but she tried to offer context, a glimpse into the mind of someone who had let their own demons consume them. You were always so steady, so strong, and I thought you didn't need me anymore. It's not an excuse, it's just how I felt. And instead of talking to you, I looked for validation in the worst possible way. By the time I finished the letter, my emotions were a tangled knot. Her words didn't absolve her of what she'd done, but they humanized her in a way I hadn't allowed myself to see before. The following weeks were a slow journey toward rebuilding. Emily continued to thrive, her resilience a constant source of inspiration. Clarissa, for her part, kept her distance, abiding by the court's terms and focusing on her limited visitation with Emily. Our interactions were polite but distant, a fragile truce that seemed to work for both of us. One Saturday afternoon, while Emily was at soccer practice, my phone buzzed with a text from Clarissa. "Thank you for letting me see her today." She seemed happy. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. "She's doing well. She's strong, like her mom." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Months turned into a year. Life became easier, though the scars of what had happened would never fully fade. Emily grew into a confident, creative young girl, her laughter filling the house with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, determined to give her the stability she deserved. Clarissa's YouTube channel had vanished entirely, her digital footprint erased as though it had never existed. From what little I'd heard through mutual acquaintances, she was working a steady job and attending counseling sessions. Whether it was genuine growth or an attempt to regain some semblance of control, I didn't know, and frankly, I didn't care. My focus was on Emily and the life we were building together. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think people can change, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, playing with the hem of her shirt. "Mom said she's different now? That she's trying to be better. Do you believe her?" I considered her words carefully. "I think people can change if they really want to," I said finally. "But it takes time. And sometimes, the people they hurt need time too." Emily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I think I want to believe her." I pulled her into a hug, my heart aching for her innocence. "That's okay, sweetheart. You can believe in her. And I'll always be here for you, no matter what." It had been 2 years since that fateful Christmas when everything fell apart. The pain and anger had dulled into a distant ache, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. Clarissa and I had found a fragile equilibrium, coexisting as co-parents without rekindling old wounds. She kept her promises, attending therapy and focusing on her relationship with Emily. One afternoon, as I picked Emily up from school, she ran toward me with an excited grin, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "Dad! Guess what?" she exclaimed. "My painting won first place in the art show." I scooped her up in a hug, her laughter ringing in my ears. "That's amazing! I'm so proud of you." As we walked to the car, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, but it had given me something even more valuable: clarity. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained a deeper understanding of what mattered most: Emily, and the life we were building together. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The past was behind me, and the future was ours to create. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.